ma tovu, o alecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, ma tovu, ma tovu. Yaakov, Mishkenatecha Yisrael, Vani berov chastecha, avo betecha, eshtachavecha kodshecha, v'yiratecha. Ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenatecha Yisrael, ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu. Mishkenatecha Yisrael, Adonai ahavti me'on beitecha, u'mekom mishkan kevodecha, mishkan kodecha, v'ani eshtachaveh Evrecha lifnei Adonai hosi ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenatecha Yisrael, ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenatecha Yisrael, ani tefilati lecha, Adonai et ratzon, Elohim berov chastecha, Elohim berov chastecha, Haneni be'emet ishecha, ma tovu, ma tovu. Mishkenatecha Yisrael, ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenatecha Yisrael, Mishkenatecha
Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome. Yasher Koach on a beautiful Matovu, Rabbi Matthew.
Well, and to you too, Leslie, and to you too, Bill.
Thank you.
It's a great way to start off.
Beautiful, absolutely.
Shabbat Shalom to everyone. We've got a little bit of a different lineup. We've shuffled the lineup a little bit. With Rabbi Mas, we were encouraging him after working so hard for several weeks in a row, finally to take some time, and he has. He's taken a week off, including today's Shabbat, so we hope that he is finding extra rest, because even though Shabbat is a day of rest, we all know you work at Acharei, it's a work day. So we hope that he is resting.
But it's a fun work day, isn't it?
It's the best when it's fun. When your work is fun, it's not work.
That's right.
Which is the way it is for us because we're all together here, which is what Matovu is supposed to remind us of how good it is when we are all together. We sometimes sing Hine Matov. Today, Matovu, these traditional words from the Torah that we say when we enter the synagogue. Because though you may be at home or somewhere else tuning in through a tablet, an iPad, a smart TV, a phone, however, when we start the service, we still want to make it feel like we're entering into the synagogue and joining together and celebrating Shabbat morning. So, yes, I'm Rabbi Matthew Leibel, and we've got Leslie Emery here and Bill Wiseman here and Marvin Polanski, my favorite Marvin, and we are your Congregation Shered Zedek ritual team for this morning and what will be the Shabbat of Parshat Acharei Mot Kedoshim. A lot of stuff in this Parsha when we get to the Torah reading, which we will get to. But of course, we open up with our shacharit, our morning service, our tefillah, our prayer, our chance to reflect on the week that has been and make sure that we are properly in the right mood and the right mode for Shabbat, of introspection, of self-reflection, and rest and peace. So we started with Matovu. We have our Sidur. You'll know it as the paperback Sidur for Shabbat morning and festivals. It is available on our website, szwinnipeg.ca. Maybe that's where you're watching from. And you can follow the links and click on the link, and it'll lead you, if you follow the Sidurim and prayer books, it'll lead you to the one for Shabbat morning and festivals. Pick that one and follow along with us so you can participate in the service. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can chat with us. We'll check in with the chat and interact with people periodically throughout the service. And you can also subscribe, so you find out every time we go live for any of our services, classes, or things like that. And you can like us. Like us, won't you like us? Please. They like me. They really like me.
What's that expression? Smash the like button?
Smash the like button. That's a
never
Rabbi
understood that, but that's
Mossism.
what the expression is.
Smash the like button. So we're ready to get into our service. We begin by counting our blessings with Birchat HaShachar, the opening blessings. They are on page 5. Leslie Emery is going to lead us through Shacharit, and we invite all of you, wherever you are on page 5, to join with us, and please rise.
Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Neshama, Shenatata bi, Shenatata bi, Tehorahi, Tehorahi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasech bibina lebchim ben yom uben laila.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani betzamo.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani bat chorim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael.
Amen.
Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Neshama, Shenatata bi, Shenatata bi, Tehorahi, Tehorahi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish harumim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim.
Amen.
Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Neshama, שנתת בי. טהורה היא, טהורה היא. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, רק הארץ על המים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשה לי כל צורכי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המכין מצעדי כבד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוזר ישראל בגבורה. אלוהי, אלוהי, נשמה, נשמה, שנתת בי, שנתת בי. טהורה היא, טהורה היא. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוטר ישראל בתפארה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, הנותן ליהב כוח. אלוהי, אלוהי, נשמה, נשמה, שנתת בי, שנתת בי. טהורה היא, טהורה היא.
We invite you to remain standing as we move into Baruch She'amar.
Baruch she'amar v'haya olam. Baruch hu, Baruch oseh bereshit. Baruch omer ve'oseh. Baruch ozer u'mekayem. Baruch merachem al haaretz. Baruch merachem על הבריות. ברוך משלם שכר טוב לרעיו. ברוך האלוה וקיים לנצח. ברוך מודה ומציע. ברוך שמו.
Please be seated. Should we check in on the chat?
Absolutely. Let me just go
See who
through
we've
some
got
of
with
them.
us this morning. Bill, what are you
Tremendous.
seeing?
Well, we have Stephen Cantor, welcome. David Wilder, Terry from New York, Sarah B., Alice, I think I know her, Sandy Polanski, Jerome Foreman, Bonnie Cham, Eric Green. We have Rocky, Marlene Richter, Shabbat Shalom with Ryan and Sarah, Alina Lashev, Louis Stern, Ian Rabb, Hannon Bell, welcome everybody, Leon Pinkovich, Terry from Toronto, welcome, Priscilla Kerr, Evelyn Hecht, we have Terry again, Clyde Herdig, Mila Merkin, Bonnie Robinson, Bonnie Cham, Corey Glasberg, Zelda, Murray Nazen, Nadine Silverman, Debbie Pollack, Rochelle Pinkovich. And if I've missed anybody, welcome. It's wonderful to have you all here this morning. I think we're all honored to have them join us at any time for any of our services. It makes us feel warm and participatory.
There's no question, Bill. And I love, you mentioned Debbie Pollack had just said hello. I love her little note there. Be holy.
Be holy, yeah.
That's not random. That has to do with today's Parsha. We'll talk a little bit in the Torah reading. What does that mean? Be holy. But that's a great greeting.
I have to add one more.
Yep.
That Lyons is joining us from Lethbridge. That man travels a lot.
It's a popular weekend destination, I
No
suppose.
kidding.
Welcome to Meryl Schwade as well. And Melanie Richards, she's here with her kids. And I always like to take an extra moment to say, hello, Ryan and Sarah. Thank you for letting us know that you're here. And if you are a kid on the chat, let us know. I'd love to say hello. We miss having kids around the building, but it's nice to know you're out there having fun and you're still joining us through the power of technology.
I like the way you paused and said that. That's great. Yeah, it's awesome to have everybody here. If you're just joining us, our website, esedwinnipeg.ca, has a link to the prayer books that we use during the week, and select the one for Shabbat morning and festivals. We're on page 8, Psalm 150, Hallelujah. We do it in Leonard Cohen style.
Hallelujah, el bekocho. Hallelujah, birkia uzo. Hallelujah, bigevurota. Hallelujah, kerov kudlo. Hallelujah, beteka shofar.
Pause for a moment at this transitional point in our service from the opening blessings and psalms to the formal beginning of Acharei. In this pause, we will turn to page 46, invite you to rise and join together in the words of the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divra chirutei v'amlich malchutei. B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chaye decho beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam ulamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitale v'yithalal shmei dekudsha brichu.
Brichu.
Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom bimromav huyaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. Mention the official beginning of Shacharit, which we have with Shochen Ad Marom. Where did I put my... Got lots of sheets up here. Page 10.
Shochen ad marom v'kadoshim
Shochen ad marom v'kadoshim
בפי ישרים תתהלל, ובדברי צדיקים תתברך, ובלשון חסידים תתרומם, ובקרב קדושים תתקדש.
Yeah. Chatzi Kaddish, bottom of page 10.
יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
ועמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחייכון וביום אחד ובחיי לכל בית ישראל. ואדוני בזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עמיה.
Yitbarach.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תאמירן בעלמה ויאמרו 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 אמן.
Amen. We rise together for a call and answer with Leslie Emery leading us for the Baruchu. And we invite you to face east and bow at the appropriate time. I think it's going to be here.
Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMvorach Le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMvorach Le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or uvorech choshech oseh shalom uvoreh et hakol.
Please be seated. The next part of our service is moving into the Shema. Big moment in the Shacharit, or any morning service, really. We invite you, of course, to cover your eyes for the Shema. After all, the Shema. Last week we did the English interpretation listen. And I love that version because it reminds us, even though it always maybe hits some people a little unfamiliar because it's in English and it's a little different, but it really, for me, brings home the message of what Shema is supposed to be about, listening all day long. And I'm guilty of this too, talking. We're talking all the time. Many of you know I used to be a radio host. And one of the best pieces of wisdom and advice I ever got when I was starting off my broadcasting career, because it's counterintuitive. They said, if you want to be good on the radio, get better at listening. Everybody here knows you can talk. The difference between the great and good broadcasters, or the great broadcasters, actually are better at listening. And I think this works for life too. Sometimes the things you don't say. Remember, there's an incredible teaching actually in this parsha, in a different part that we don't read. Or maybe, no, I lied. It was a few weeks ago. I didn't lie. I was just wrong. Where something terrible happens to Aaron, and what does the Torah tell us? Aaron was silent. It was in Aaron's silence. It was in Aaron's listening and waiting that the answer and the wisdom was found. And the same thing with the Shema. So, the only thing is, I need to make sure. I'm just going to let Leslie do it without piano because I don't want to do it in the wrong key. I'm going to let, and then I'll find you. And then after that, we're going to follow it up with the beautiful Debbie Friedman version of "And You Shall Love," which reminds us with the English words of what that first paragraph, that super familiar first paragraph that is loaded with mitzvot about tefillin and mezuzot and teaching children and reciting the Shema. And of course, loving God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. We will get to that, but first, the Shema. Leslie, take it away.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Page 15.
And you shall love Adonai, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And all these words which I command you on this day shall be in your heart, shall be in your heart, and you will teach them diligently unto your children, and you will speak of them when you're sitting in your house, when you are walking by the way, and when you're lying down, when you're rising up, when you're rising up, and you will bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they will be for frontlets between your eyes, and you will write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, and upon your gates, that you may remember and do all of my commandments, and be holy unto your God, unto your God, unto your God.
Beautiful.
Standing. Nicely done.
And of course, that last line there, and be holy. We talked about that off the beginning. Today's parsha is Acharei Mot Kedoshim, a double parsha, and Kedoshim means holy, but it's in the plural, right? A group of people who are holy. And what does that mean to be holy? Which is a commandment that we'll read today. We'll talk more about that, but we see that it's all linked together, our tefillot, our prayers in the Shacharit service, and what we're going to read. How are things looking on the chat? I wanted to do a little check-in before we moved over to Micha Mocha and got ready for the Amidah. Take a little just pause after that big moment for the Shema. What are we seeing? Anything new there,
well,
Bill?
We have Meryl Schwade, who's joined us. Charlotte Dyer, I think it is. Alan Cantor and Gloria are here. Rena is also as well. Welcome.
Welcome. And Phyllis is harmonizing at home. And
I
thank
saw
you for
that.
letting me know, Phyllis. I can hear you. And I'll
she
be listening for your voice in my mind.
And she can really sing good harmony.
I really
fabulous.
loved singing with Phyllis at the family service.
She can do anybody's harmony. Tenor, bass, doesn't matter.
So now we move on to Micha Mocha. In a moment, we will stand for the Amidah, kind of the central prayer in Judaism. Every service has it, morning, afternoon, evening, which, of course, you know if you've been with us before, we do out loud, we sing out loud, and then after Lador Vador, we break into silent prayer, a chance for our own words of prayer maybe, or following in the Siddur. But before we get to the Amidah, on page 17, we have this Craig Taubman version of Micha Mocha, which really focuses on new beginnings. After all, this was part of the Song of the Sea. We read it not too long ago during Pesach, when our ancestors came through, finally got to freedom, and proclaimed a new song, a new beginning. Shirah Chadashah. Page 17, Micha Mocha.
Micha Mocha ba'elim Adonai, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה. שירה חדשה, שיבחו גאונים לשמך, על שפתיים, יחד כולם, הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה. Please rise. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדי חינומך יהודה בישראל, פועלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, גיא ישראל.
Amen. So now that we're up, or if we're not, I invite you to stand. It's now time for the Amidah, which will begin for us on page 18 in this Heicha Kedusha style, led by Leslie. And then after Lador Vador, we will invite you to continue with your own words of prayer, again following in the Siddur, in the Hebrew or the English, or not passing up this moment, which Rabbi Mas always reminds us is supposed to be envisioned as a private audience before God, not passing up this incredible moment. And if the words of the Siddur don't do it for you, using your own words of prayer. But for now, we'll join in the words of the Siddur in the Hebrew, beginning on page 18. Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot, U'mevii Goel Livnei Vneihem, Leman Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer, U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayim etim atah, Rav le'Hoshia, Morid atah, Mechalkel Chaim bechesed, Mechayim metim berachamim rabim, Somech noflim ve'rofeh cholim, U'matir asurim, U'mekayem emunato lishenei afar, Mi chamocha b'gevurot, U'mi domelach, Melech memit u'mechaye, U'matzmiach Yeshua. V'ne'eman atah lechayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechaye hametim. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, Keshem shemakdishim oto, Bishmei Aron, Kakatuv ayad Nevi'echa, Vekara zelzel Eyamar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzebaot, Meloko haaretz kevodo. Az bekorash gadol, adir v'chazak mashmi'im kol, midnasim l'umat serafim, l'umatam baruch yomeru, Baruch kevod Adonai mimekomo. Mimkomecha malkeinu, malkeinu tovia, Letim loch aleinu, Mechakim anachnu lach, Matai, 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 Timloch betzion, Bekarov, Bekarov, Beyameinu, Leolam la'ed tishkon, Titkada v'titkadash, Betoch Yerushalayim ircha, Ledor vador, Ledor vador, Ulenetzach netzachim, Ledor vador, Ledor Al Yedei David, Mashiach Tzidkecha. Al Yedei David, Mashiach Tzidkecha. Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Tzion, ledor vador. Hallelujah.
Ledor Vador is on page 22.
Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid God lecha, ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushatcha nagdish. Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid God lecha, ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushatcha nagdish. V'shivchacha Eloheinu, mipinu lo yamush leolam va'ed. Ki el melech gadol, ki el melech gadol, v'kadosh atah. Ledor vador, ledor vador, ledor vador, nagid God lecha, ulenetzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushatcha nagdish. Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch hu Baruch Shemo. Shakoach Leslie on a beautiful Shacharit. Bill as well. We invite you now to remain standing and continue with your own silent Amidah, again using the words of the Siddur in Hebrew or English or your own words of prayer. When you finish your prayers, you may be seated. You can start, I'll find you. We're going to do something we don't often do, but we sometimes do, and it's a beautiful way. I always mention that the last blessing in the Amidah is for peace. In the mornings, we sing Sim Shalom. In the afternoons and evenings, we sing Shalom Rab, but it's always for peace. And in those final words, we often sing Oseh Shalom. So we're going to do a version of Oseh Shalom as soon as I find it. Give me your first note. One more time.
Yeah.
You think so?
Perfect.
Let's see. Oseh Shalom, the Debbie Friedman version.
Oseh Shalom bimromav uyaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav uyaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav uyaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav uyaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav uyaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav uyaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
It's so inspiring, isn't it?
I love that version. Thanks for suggesting it, Leslie.
You're welcome.
You can take a seat for a moment and relax. We're going to do the Torah service in a moment, but first on page 32, we have Kaddish Shalem.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash merabah.
Amen.
Ve'amad yivrach yiruteh ve'amlich malchuteh b'chai echonu v'yomechon uv'chai lekol beit Yisrael. Pagalav v'zman karim ve'imeru.
Amen.
Yehi shmei rabba mevorach.
Le'alam olam me'amaya yitbarach.
Yitbarach ve'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalel shmei dekudesha.
Brichu.
Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechmata damiram be'ama ve'imeru.
Amen.
Titkabel toton uvauton da kol Yisrael kadam avuon divishmaya ve'imeru.
Amen.
Yehi shlam araba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom imromav huyaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru.
Amen.
Yasher Koach, Rabbi Matthew, for leading us through Shacharit so beautifully and for your awesome piano playing.
Isn't he good?
He's great.
I appreciate it very much. This piano is a fun piano to play, but it's easy when you've got folks like Leslie and Bill to follow. So that's what made it great for me. I enjoyed it very much, and I hope you did too. And hopefully you'll enjoy the next part of our service as we move seamlessly into the Torah service. We invite you to rise once again wherever you are. Page 33, Vahi bin So Ha'aron. The ark is open.
Oh, and a quick note, if you are zooming in, as soon as I leave the screen, I'll open the Zoom room.
That's right. Leslie's, we all are wearing, multiple hats at the same time. Sometimes Bill's there, and sometimes Bill's there, and sometimes Bill's there. And he just kind of pops up, he just kind of like, next thing you know, he's behind you. And Leslie will be our Zoom master, the master of the Zoom room, but she can't be in two places at once. So if you have an aliyah, please get ready for after Leslie leads us in the Torah service, she will open up the Zoom aliyot. And we have a couple of open. In fact, we have 4 open aliyot. So for those of you who have access to the chat, if you're a Kohen maybe and you want to get in there, you can have the first aliyah, a Levi, a second aliyah. The 5th and 6th aliyot are available as well. So Zooming might be a little bit tricky, but if you would like Bill to recite the blessings on your behalf, we'd love to offer you an honorary aliyah. This morning we have Rishon, Sheni, the 1st and the 2nd, Chamishi and Shishi, the 5th and the 6th. So we'll do a little first come, first served kind of style. And don't forget to give us your Hebrew name and your parents' Hebrew names in the chat so we can call you up when the time comes.
Rabbi?
Yes, sir.
You just gave me an idea. We have some people from the family service who are watching us with kids, right?
Great, yes.
Can we incorporate a little game that says, "Where's Bill?"
Where's Bill?
Yeah, well, why not? Right?
Well,
Make it fun.
You wore the wrong outfit. You'll have to wear like a red and white striped shirt.
I'm open for it. Just give me an outfit. I'll wear it.
I sense a Purim costume coming on for next year, Bill. Where's Bill? Where's Bill? For now, we invite you again to rise, page 33, as Leslie continues for us, and we take the Torah out of the ark with Bill's help. Vayhi bin Soah.
ויהי בנתו אהרון ויאמר משה קום אדוני ויפוצו אויביך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך כי מציון תצא תורה כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר אדוני מירושלים ברוך שנתן תורה תורה ברוך שנתן תורה תורה לעמו ישראל Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad
Echad Eloheinu Kadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo
Gadlul Adonai iti Uneromema Shemo Yachdav Lecha Adonai Hagedula V'Hagevura Atiferet Ve'anetzach Ve'ahod Kicho Bashamayim Uvaretz Kicho Bashamayim Uvaretz Lecha Adonai Hamamlacha Ve'haminaseh Lechol Erosh Romemu
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 Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachave
Ve'ishtachave Ve'ishtachave
Ve'adom raglav kadoshu Romemu
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 Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachave
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 Ve'har kadosh, ki kadosh, ki kadosh, Adonai Eloheinu.
Please be seated. Wow, it's just past 11 o'clock here in the local time. Time to read from the Torah. And we've got our 4 aliyot. How about those? The Keeners. The HIS sibling, Terry Kushner. She's going to be our Kohen Aliyah. Thelma Suris, our Shani. Jerome Foman, our Chamishi. And Alan Cantor, our Shishi. As well as some other people. If you are zooming in, and we know a few people are, let's get ready for that. Leslie, our Zoom master, is going to head to the back and get ready for that. And I'm going to slide up to the Torah. So bear with me.
I never saw myself as being tech support for anybody, but here I am. Life is full of surprises.
This is what happens. Oh, here's my, all these papers, everything to keep track of. I got it. I'm here. I promise. So, if you're just joining us or you joined us a little late, there was a band in the 1960s that I'm quite fond of. And I know many of you know them. They're called, not the best and most creative name ever, they are called The Band. They got famous playing in Marvin Polanski's backyard. No, wait, that was the Guess Who. That's a different band. Same time period, and that's a true story. One night we're going to do a sit-down with Marvin, who no one ever gets to see because he's behind the camera. He's going to tell you how he gave the Guess Who their big break. Right, Marvin? But at the same time, there was a band called The Band, and they got very famous because they were a backup band for Bob Dylan. When Bob Dylan went electric in the mid-60s and he kind of ruffled a lot of feathers, they were his backup band, and they were almost all Canadian. In fact, they were all Canadian except for one guy, Levon Helm, who was from the South. Robbie Robertson, very famous, a whole bunch of guys from Southern Ontario. And after their time with Dylan, they broke off, or they did their own thing, and they were The Band. And why am I talking about them? Because they were famous for all being able to play different instruments. And on different songs, they would all kind of rotate. The guy who was usually on the drums would move to mandolin, which means that somebody else had to move onto the drums, and he used to play piano, so someone had to move from the organ to the piano, and there was no organ, and so someone had to do bass, and someone was playing the tuba. Anyway, versatility. Our ritual team at Acharei is the modern-day version of The Band. And today we have done some shuffling because Rabbi Moss is enjoying a much-needed Shabbat off, which means it's a different configuration. Same folks, same band, different configuration. You're used to, if you join us, or even if you go to Shabbat on a regular basis, having a big sermon at the end of the service. And quite often when Rabbi Moss is away, this is what we do here. I jump in there and do the sermon. Today, because of the Parsha, and because of specifically 3 teachings in this Parsha, our Dvar Torah is going to be basically a little bit of an extended version of my play-by-play style commentary. There are 3 points that I want to highlight, and they are so important, I believe, and so full of meaning that we can unpack, that I think that they will leave us with 3 teachings, and by the end of this Torah reading, hopefully we will have studied some Torah together, and we will offer almost 3 mini Divrei Torah along the way. Because as we mentioned, this is Parshat Acharei Kedoshim, a double parsha that is often done together. Acharei, after the death. Kedoshim, a group of people who are holy. After the death of whom? 2 of Aaron's 4 sons. Remember a couple weeks ago, Parshat Shmini? We didn't read it, but we talked about it because of this year's triennial cycle. We didn't read it, but we talked about it. 2 of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, get overexcited, forget the proper protocol to safeguard themselves in a very holy space. They rush into the newly consecrated Mishkan. They offer Esh Zara, a strange foreign fire, and they are killed, struck down on the spot. I referenced this earlier when we talked about the Shema and silence being golden. In that moment, we are told Aaron, Aharon, their father, was silent. He said nothing. He waited and listened and reflected, and that's what happened in Shmini. And this picks up the story at the beginning of the full Parsha, Acharei Mot, after the death of the two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu. It leads us into a reading that is actually very familiar for people, even if you only come to synagogue a couple times a year, because the beginning of Parshat Acharei Mot, which we don't read this year, is the Yom Kippur ritual, the ritual with the two goats. Slaughter one, send the other one off into the wilderness. The ritual of taking blood and going behind the curtain and sprinkling and cleansing that area one time a year. The ritual of fasting as a community. It's all laid out. It all comes down from Moses to Aaron, from God through Moses to Aaron and all the people. Acharei Mot, after the death of the sons. But what we read today in our triennial year 2 cycle is what comes after that Yom Kippur ritual, which is a little bit about a fascination, one of the fascinations the Israelites had, which is with blood. It plays into some of our kashrut rules, specifically the fact that blood may not be eaten. That's where we begin. And then the 3 teachings that I want to focus on over the course of this Torah reading come in the rest of the Parsha. As we move from chapter 17, that's where we begin in Leviticus chapter 17. So get your Chumash ready if you want to follow. Leviticus 17, specifically verse 8. After we talk about blood in chapter 17, in chapter 18, we start moving into some of the more difficult subject matter in the Torah. I mentioned it last night at Kabbalat Shabbat. For me, the most problematic passage in modern times from the Torah is in today's Torah reading, and we will look at it. There's talk about forbidden relationships, forbidden sexual relationships, often because they're incestuous and they're within the family. And there is some talk about what the spirit behind the laws is supposed to be. And there is the transition into the second part of this double Parsha, Kedoshim, where the Israelites are told quite plainly, you need to be holy because I am holy. So a lot, like I said, to uncover in today's Torah reading. But in the words of a famous movie from, 15 or so years ago, we start with, there will be blood. Sorry, that was a little dark. But yes, it starts with blood. And chapter 17 in Leviticus, verse 8, I will get the honor of doing the Torah reading today, which is great because I'm up here and I can share a little bit on these teachings as we go through. Our first aliyah goes to our honoree, Terry Kushner, joining us from Toronto. Bill Wiseman will recite the blessings on her behalf. If you have the Etz Chaim Chumash, or if you're following along with our PDFs on the website of the Etz Chaim Chumash, szwinnipeg.ca, it is page 687, chapter 17, verses 8 through 12. And here we go. V'yazor v'im yoshia l'chol ha'chosim bo v'nomar amen. Hakol v'godel Eloheinu tnu chavol Torah tamod. Tova bar Yaakov ha'kohen u'minu l'kohana l'aliyah rishona. Baruch shenatan troma yisrael b'kedushato. Ve'atem advihim Adonai Elohechem chaim kolchem hayom.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Vorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Vorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Valehem tomar ishish mi bein Yisrael min hager asher yagur betocham asher yaleh ola ozavach vel petach ohel moed lo yevienu lasot oto ladonai v'nichrad aishahu me'amav v'ishish mi bein Yisrael umin hager hagar betocham asher yochal kol dam v'natati fanai b'nefesh haochelet et adam v'ichrati ota mikerav ama ki Nefesh habasar badam hi vani netativ lachem al hamizbeach lechaper al nafshotechem ki hadam hu banefesh yechaper al ken amarti livnei Yisrael kol nefesh mikem lo tochal dam ve'ager agar betochechem lo yochal dam.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher Kochech to Terry Kushner, our first honorary honoree this morning. Shabbat Shalom to you, Terry. Thank you for accepting this aliyah, for jumping at it. And you see, very familiar, the life forces in the blood can't eat the blood. That's why you know that a huge part of the koshering process is salting and draining of the blood. Has to do with this reference here in the Torah and a few other places where we have seen this before. A little bit more on blood. Chapter 17, verses 13 through 16, as we move into our next aliyah, Sheni. In the Etz Chaim, it starts on page 687. Our honorary honoree for the second aliyah is Thelma Suris. Tamod Tova Bakedalia Veleya Lalia Hashniya.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Vorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai vorach leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Ve'ishish mibnei Yisrael min hager agar betocham asher yatzud seid chaya of asher yeachel v'shafach et damo v'chisahu be'afar ki nefesh kol basar damo v'nafsho Va'omar livnei Yisrael dam kol basar lo tochelu ki nefesh kol basar damo hi kol achlav yikaret v'chol nefesh asher tochal nevela utrefa ba'ezrach uvager v'chibes begadav v'rachatz b'mayim v'tamer ha'erev v'taher ve'im lo yechabes uvsaro lo yirchatz v'nasa avono.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Asher Kochech and a Shabbat Shalom to Thelma Suris. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. And thank you for accepting this aliyah to the Torah. We'll move on to Shlishi, the third reading this morning, and into the next chapter, chapter 18. This is where we get into some very, very serious stuff. Page 688, if you have the Etz Chaim Chumash. Our first aliyah, chapter 18, verses 1 through 5. Pay close attention to this opening paragraph. Last night, one of the three teachings, if we could sum them up quickly, it's what's the purpose of these mitzvot? Context, and what does it mean to be holy? Those are the three areas. And this opening paragraph here in chapter 18, which makes up this full aliyah here for number 3, it's very important to understand the lead up, because a bunch of forbidden relationships and rules are about to come, but they don't come out of nowhere. context is very important. I mentioned this last night during Kabbalat Shabbat, and this next Aliyah provides some very important context for understanding today's somewhat difficult reading. Our honoree joining us by Zoom is Alice Weissman. Alice is commemorating her father, Ivan Edward Gillespie's Yortzeit, with this Aliyah. It's great to have you here, Alice. Call you up now for the third Aliyah, again, chapter 18, verses 1 through 5. Ta'amod Sirachaya bar Avram v'Shifra l'Aliyah hashliishit.
Baruchu et Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el bnei Yisrael ve'amarta alehem ani Adonai Elohechem. K'maaser Eretz Mitzrayim asher yeshavtem ba lo tasu uchmaaser Eretz Canaan asher ani mevi etchem shama lo tasu uvchukotehem lo telechu emishpatai tasu v'chukotai tishmeru lalechet bahem ani Adonai Elohechem ushmartem et chukotai ve'mishpatai asher yaseh otam hadam v'chai bahem ani Adonai.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. Yisher kochech, Alice. Shabbat shalom. Great to hear you.
Shabbat shalom.
Great to see you. We thank Alice for joining us for the third Aliyah. First teaching comes from this reading. 2 words. Maybe some of the most important words in the Torah. Just before we get to them, the context I mentioned, which is not the teaching, it becomes the teaching for the next, becomes important for the second teaching. Sorry for the confusion, but the context is so key. Everything here is being positioned as, let's put it simply, the things that the Egyptians did, the things that the Canaanites do, don't do them. So it's important to remember that what's about to follow in this list are all things that are associated with Egyptian and Canaanite society. These 2 forces, the Egyptian society that the Israelites have left behind, the Canaanite society that is, in their perspective, inhabiting their holy land by mistake or not properly or instead of them. So these are the 2 kind of societies, cultures, in which Israelite society is starting that it wants to be markedly different from. It's very important that these rules that we're about to read in the next Aliyah, all of these forbidden relationships, we can draw the conclusion quite easily that they are forbidden for Israelites because they are practiced by either the Egyptians or the Canaanites or both. It's very important, I would argue, for the context, and we'll get to that. But what are the 2 words? They came at the very end of this reading, v'chai bahem, and live by them. They're talking about the mitzvot. Chukotai, mishpatai, toratai. God's talking, right? My laws, my rules, my mitzvot, my commandments. V'chai bahem, and live by them. There's this famous story, you've probably heard it talked about, Rabbi Akiva talked about it. It might even be in the Etz Chaim Chumash as a note. 2 fellows walking in the desert. They're lost. They're running out of time because they don't have, only one of them has water. And only the one who has water only has enough for himself to drink If he drinks it, he'll be okay, but his pal will die. If they try to split it, it won't be enough. They'll both die. What is the guy with the water supposed to do? Well, these two words, v'chai bahem, and live by them, the rabbis realized that the whole point of mitzvot, right? We think about in Judaism, there's so many mitzvot, 600 plus in the Torah alone, hundreds added after the fact by the rabbis. That gives us thousands of mitzvot. It feels very restrictive. It feels very limiting. That's the way a lot of people look at it, right? Judaism, a lot of these rules, if you want to be observant, it can be very restrictive. But the whole spirit behind it is that these rules are supposed to make it better for our lives. We're supposed to live by them. V'chai bahem. They're not supposed to make life more difficult. They're supposed to enhance life. But the most important thing is you're supposed to still live by them. The interpretation of v'chai bahem gives us this idea that you're allowed to break any mitzvah except for idolatry, adultery, and murder in order to save a life, right? If it's Shabbat and you're walking along and somebody is, God forbid, having a heart attack, you pick up the phone and you call 911. You get in your car, you drive them. You break the rules of Shabbat to save a life because the mitzvot are worthless if we're sacrificing life in order to perform them, in order to perfect them. That's why the fellow is supposed to drink the water and it's tough for his friend. It's very bad, but he is supposed to live. It's no good for them to share the water and both die. It's no good for both of them not to drink at all and both die. The one of them who has the water is supposed to drink and live by the mitzvot. V'chai bahem. That's today's teaching number 1. Very, very important stuff. Now keep in mind of the context. Egyptian society, Canaanite society, the Israelites trying to be very, very different as we read what comes next in Rivi, our 4th aliyah this morning. Chapter 18, verses 6 through 21, page 689 in the Etz Chaim Chumash. And our honorary honoree, Bill will recite the blessings on her behalf, is Beverly Zatzer. With this aliyah, Beverly is marking a yortzeit in her life, her father's yortzeit, Harry Rubenstein. Beverly, it's our pleasure and honor to have you, and we'll continue now with Rivi, the 4th aliyah. Tamod bracha bat Gershon Deleah. Lalia Harvit.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Vorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Vorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Ishi shel kol sher besaro lo tikrevu legalot ervani Adonai ervad avicha vervad imcha lo tegale imcha hi lo tegale ervata ervad asher avicha lo tegale ervad avicha hi ervad achorcha vad avicha ovad imecha moledet baito moledet chutz lo tegale ervatan ervad bad bincha ovad bitecha lo tegale ervat Ki ervatcha hena ervat bareshet avicha moledet avicha chodcha hi lo tegale ervata ervat achod avicha lo tegale she'er avicha hi ervat achod imcha lo tegale ki she'er imcha hi ervat achi avicha lo tegale el ishto lo tikrav doratcha hi ervat kalatcha lo tegale eshet bincha hi lo tegale ervata ervat eshet achicha lo tegale ervat achicha hi ervad isha uvita lo tegale et bat benav et bat bita lo tikach legalot ervata shara hena zimahi v'isha el achota lo tikach litzror legalot ervata leha bechayeha velisha benidad tumata lo tikrav legalot ervata vel eshet amitecha lo titen shechavtecha lezara letomava umizaracha lo titen lehavir למולך ולא תחלל את שם אלוהיך אני אדוני.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'chaye Olam Nata B'tochenu Baruch Ata Adonai נותן התורה.
Amen. I share kochech to Beverly Zatzer, our honorary fourth honoree this morning. Thank you, Beverly. Shabbat shalom to you. So, a whole bunch of forbidden relationships you're not allowed to uncover the nakedness of. That's the euphemistic language that we heard over and over and over there. Legalot ervata, to uncover the nakedness. And again, the context is important because I mentioned this last night. So often when quoting the Torah, when quoting the Bible, verses are just kind of thrown around as if they're written as one-liners, but they're not. They're written as part of sometimes, especially when it's legal material, legal code. And you can't separate these forbidden relationships from the fact that the opening introduction was the things that the Egyptians do, the things that the Canaanites do, they are abhorrent to you. That's why after a whole bunch of forbidden incestuous and familial sexual relationships, we throw in this line kind of out of nowhere, don't offer your kids to Molech. Don't sacrifice your children to one of the Canaanite gods. That has nothing to do with all of these relationships. It just kind of appears there in that last line we read, but it has something to do with the greater theme, which is this was a common Canaanite practice. So why am I telling you all this? Because I mentioned to you that for me, the most problematic line in the Torah is coming up. In fact, it's the very next line we read, the line that kicks off the Chamishi Aliyah, the fifth Aliyah. This line is often taken out of context as a standalone line. And in our society now, in 2021, where we are so much more enlightened, aware, woke, as these kids say these days. I don't know if that's right. I'm not a kid anymore. We know about, we talk, when it comes to gender, we have so many advanced and enlightened perspectives on what gender means that didn't exist thousands of years ago when the Torah came into being. About sexual orientation and preference and all of these things that are very difficult to talk about now because they're very sensitive. And like I said, we're more aware of it, more enlightened. The Torah didn't exist in a time with any of that perspective. It's important to keep that in context as well. You'll see what I mean, and then we'll talk about it with our second teaching of the morning after we get through Chamishi here, which is our fifth Aliyah. And our honoree for the fifth Aliyah is Jerome Foman. Thank you, Jerome. Bill will recite the blessings on Jerome's behalf. Chapter 18, verses 22 through 30, beginning on page 691. Yamod Zelig ben Ephraim v'Golda l'Aliyah hachamishit.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai vorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai vorach leolam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'et zachar lo tishka mishkevei shatoeva hi. Uv'cho behema lo titen shechovtecha letomava. V'isha lo tamo lifnei v'ema l'riva tevelhu. Al titamu bechol eile ki vechol eile nimu agoyim asher ani mishaleach mipnechem vatid ma'aretz vavkod avona alea vataki haaretz et yoshveya ushmartem atem et chukotai ve'mishpatai ve'lo tasu mikol hatoevot ha'ele ha'ezrach ve'ager agar b'tochechem Ki kol hatoivot ha'ele asu anshe haaretz asher lifnechem vatidma haaretz v'lo taki haaretz etchem b'tama'achem ota kasher kad hagoy asher lifnechem ki kol asher yaseh mikol hatoivot ha'ele v'nichretu anefashot osot mikerav amam ushmartem emishmarti levilti asot mechukot hatoivot asher nasu lifnechem V'lo titamu bahem ani Adonai Elohechem.
Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch ata Adonai notena Torah.
Amen. Yasher koach to Jerome Foman, our fifth honoree this morning. Thank you, Jerome. Shabbat shalom to you. Thank you for tuning in, for watching us, for so many services. We really appreciate it. I saw Thelma's comment about how to many people I'm still a kid. I understand, of course. But this is, so you read it there, the first line. This for me is the most problematic passage in the Torah. So problematic, in fact, side story, what we're reading here is actually what we used to read, and many congregations around the world still read in the afternoon as the Torah reading on Yom Kippur. I mentioned to you the context, the first part of Acharei is the Yom Kippur ritual. We read that on the morning. But in the afternoon, before we read from Maftir Yonah, we used to read this part, this chapter 18. Don't do what the Egyptians and Canaanites did, all of these forbidden sexual relationships. And then this last aliyah is the final aliyah. And it starts off with this very, very problematic line for me. The Ed Zachar, you're not supposed to lie with a man the way you lie with a woman. It is an abomination. And we know that this is mentioned a lot of the time as a quote from the Bible that, well, is used quite often to fuel hate against homosexual people. Now, you know the stance of Congregation Shered Zedek that evolved a long time ago, actually, and we would perform these unions, and we have performed these unions. And so people wonder about how do we reconcile that stance and my personal stance and something that I think Rabbi Mas and others that we care about very much with the fact that it's very plain right here in the Torah. Why do I put quotes? Because I said you first of all need the context. So again, I will repeat. This comes on the heels, this line, of all of these other relationships. It is not meant to be taken as one line out of context. The Torah says that, gay men are terrible. Be very, very, very careful because that is not what it says. It combines it with all of these other relationships that were the common practices of Egyptian and Canaanite society and that the Israelites were very, very determined to distance themselves from. It's also important to understand that, again, what we said, this ruling does not come at a time when there was any concept whatsoever of a homosexual love, right? It's purely based on, and look at the very line that comes next. You can't, a human being can't get with an animal. Well, no one would ever have expected that, I think, to be a loving relationship. It would be about the fact that probably on a basic level, there's no procreation that can happen. And again, thousands of years ago, they weren't thinking the way we think now about love when it comes to sex and things like that. When they saw homosexual relationships, they saw what they saw in Egyptian society and Canaanite society, that men who got together was often about dominance. It was often about, think about Sodom and Gomorrah. Think about that story. Rabbi Mas referenced it last week. When there are these guests in the town, what did the people of Sodom wanted to do to these angels who were dressed up as men? It wasn't a loving relationship they were looking for, if you get what I'm saying. So that it's so important for me in interpreting this law, this rule, to understand that it is not saying that two men who are in love with each other can't be in love with each other. There's something evil or terrible about that. There's no way. That's the idea, because it also doesn't talk about women in the same context. It's about the fact that when you take a step back and you look at what Egyptian society was, Canaanite society, the only way the Israelites understood a homosexual relationship was one that was about force and not love, about dominance, not about companionship. They weren't woke to it, but we are now. Which means when we read this line, we have to read it in the proper context. We have to take a step back and we have to understand that this line does not stand alone. It also does not need to be completely thrown out. It needs to be reinterpreted. The Torah is something very special, very holy, but also very old. Before a lot of the changes in modern society, which seem to be changing daily, if not annually. And one of those changes is that we are more enlightened when it comes to relationships. So we have to combine what we know from our daily lives and with something from the very beginning of the Torah. All human beings are created b'tselem Elohim. That is a line that is timeless. That is a line that does not need context. This is a line that does. And I hope that gives you an idea into how I, Rabbi Mas, and many rabbis reconcile the Torah when it gets difficult and problematic like this with the way we want to live our lives and our congregants to live their lives now.
Rabbi,
Bill.
may I make a comment?
No.
We were all here
Right.
just listening to the struggles that you're going through with this thing. Do you remember how careful and how long it took Rabbi Green? He invited discussion. He invited the controversy. He wanted to make sure that our congregants thoroughly discussed it on either side. There was no judgment made. I think it took, if I remember correctly, a number of years before he was comfortable enough to feel that the congregants had some of the struggles that you just went through and thought them out before I think we even went to a vote. And to his credit, when we did, no one, there were some still disagreements, but no one, to my knowledge, left the synagogue because of that.
Right.
So what you just described, I remember seeing the difficulty, the pain that he was going through. He wanted to ensure that we went through the discussion as best as we could to what you just described. So
Yes.
that's what we all lived through that.
It was very important moment for Sherry Zedek, and it's something that whenever I read this parsha, certainly I grapple with, as Bill just mentioned. But I think at least I hope for me that explanation, it gives me perspective, and hopefully I was able to share that with all of you. That's our second teaching, and overall the message is context is important. Last night at Kabbalat Shabbat, I told the story that there's a lot of Disney Plus watching in my house, and that if you look at some of the cartoons from like my childhood, from Jungle Book, Aristocats, there's some stuff that isn't so appropriate. Movies like that would never be made. Cultural stereotypes are often promoted, and rather than completely throw away these movies, sometimes you can't avoid it. But what Disney does is there are disclaimers, there's discussion. There's a mention at the beginning of these movies that you have to be careful when watching this to understand the time they were made in, how they couldn't be made in the same way today, how there are good things in these movies, but also problematic things. And the Torah is just like that. It's on us, the teachers and the people studying it, to make sure that we're interpreting it as we always say we do. The Torah is applicable in all situations. You just have to be giving it the proper context and interpretation. So that's teaching number 2. We've got a third one coming up, and it's going to be right here as we get to the 6th Torah reading, Shishi, chapter 19 now, verses 1 through 3. This is the part that would be Kedoshim. And Alan Cantor jumped at the opportunity to be our 6th honorary honoree. I just can't remember. Yes, got it. Page, if you have the Acharei, 693. Yamor Alukim Pesach ben Yosef Moshe Vester Pesi Lalia Hashishit.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Vorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Vorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayidaber Adonai al Moshe lemor daber el kol adat bnei Yisrael ve'amarta lehem kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem ishimo ve'aviv tirau ve'et shabtotai tishmoru ani Adonai Elohechem.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet, V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Yasher Koach to Alan Cantor. Thank you for offering to do an aliyah, for accepting this honor, and for being a participant in our Shabbat service, Alan. Always a pleasure to have you. I know if Alan were on the bima, he'd be grabbing at the mic to make some kind of speech.
That's right.
And I look forward to the future, hopefully not too far from now, when we can be together and you can do the same thing. We've got one Torah reading coming up, but here's our third and final teaching. And if you're just joining us, not doing a full Dvar Torah, there were just these three main points I wanted to talk about. We've had two, right? V'chai bahem. The mitzvot are there to live by, not to die by, to live by. Huge moment in Jewish law, those two words. The second thing, the importance of context, particularly with a line that is so problematic for me, forbidding homosexual relationships, but from a time when they didn't know what we know now, and so we try and combine our better judgment and our Torah together. Context helps us do that. And the third thing, in that very short reading, Kedoshim tihiyu. That is the key. The key word for me is not Kedoshim. God says to Moses, tell the people, you shall be holy. Kedoshim tihiyu, ki kadosh ani, because I am holy. And then what's going to follow here in this last reading and then going on, all these examples in daily life, from personal relationships to business relationships to the food we eat to the sacrifices. There are moments to infuse holiness and godliness in every single moment. From the way you are loving your friend, you love your neighbor as you love yourself, to the way you don't let a sacrifice spoil and you eat it as quickly as you can. In everything, every way of life, there's an opportunity to infuse holiness. But the key word for me is not the holiness or holy, Kedoshim, but tihiyu. There's this, we talk about the Jewish people being the chosen people. We say it when we recite these blessings. Every blessing, Asher Bachar Bana, you chose us. Right? There's Chaim Potak's book, The Chosen. And that kind of language has always gotten us into a little bit of trouble in the rest of the world because it makes it sound like we're saying we're better than everybody or holier than they are or this kind of stuff. Especially when you read the Torah and you say, you shall be holy because your God is holy. Again, there's something that we're kind of missing. God does not say you are holy. God says you need to work at it to be holy. I've set the bar higher for you than everybody else. You're not being gifted anything. In fact, I'm challenging you to things that I don't challenge other people to. Nothing is given here. Nothing is taken for granted. It's not you are holy because I am holy. It's you need to strive to be holy. And it's one of those things that you never actually truly attain. There are days where you probably are holy, but that doesn't count for anything tomorrow if you throw it all away. Trying to be holy, you shall be holy, is something that we each have to pursue every single day. It is you never get to the point where you are holy. Maybe in a moment, but there's always another moment coming, and you always have to keep in mind, Kedoshim tihiyu, you shall be holy, not you're already holy. Even with the Torah, even with Sinai, even with the Exodus, there's still a lot you have to learn. Teaching number 3. There you go. That's why I didn't want to do a Dvar Torah today, because it's right here in the Torah. These are the Divrei Torah. And I hope that these teachings have been meaningful for you because, well, can't tell that they're meaningful for me. What are you watching? No, I'm just kidding.
Yasher koach, Rabbi. They were really right on today.
I appreciate it. So that's why we're a little bit later on here. We're going to have our final Torah reading and then move into the Haftarah. Our honoree joining us on Zoom will be our Haftarah reader, the great Bonnie Robinson.
Woohoo!
A legend in her own time.
Bonnie.
She has a fan club, all of us.
Bonnie Robinson was a member of our ritual team for a while after being a tremendous volunteer. She's retired semi because she still leads services for us once a week during the week to help us out. And this morning she is chanting the Haftarah for Acharei Mot Kedoshim, but before that she is our 7th/Maftir honoree. We'll call her up now for this 7th reading. Just a list of examples, incredible lines from the Torah with the theme of holiness. The striving to be holy is in everything we do. Page 694, chapter 19, verses 4 through 14. Ta'amod Miriam bat Ephraim velvoveto, maftirach izki.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach,
Baruch Adonai Borach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Al tifnu el ha'elilim velohei masecha lo tasu lachem ani Adonai Elohechem v'chi tizbechu zev shlamim l'Adonai lirtzonchem tizbachu biyom zivchachem yachel mimachorat v'hanotar ad yom hashlishi ba'esh yisaref Ve'im he'acho ye'achel bayom hashlishi piguhu lo yeratzeh ve'ochlav avono yisa ki yekodesh Adonai chilel v'nichreta nefesh hahi me'ameha uvkutzrechem et kitzir artzechem lo techale pe'atzadcha liktzor ve'leke kitzircha lo tilaket ve'charmecha lo te'olel uferet karmecha lo tilaket le'ani ve'lager tazov otam ani Adonai Elohechem lo tignovu v'lo techachashu v'lo tishachru ish bamito v'lo tishavu v'shmi lashaker v'chilalta Shem Elohecha ani Adonai lo tashok erecha v'lo tigzol lo talin pulat sachir ichad boker lo tikalel cheresh v'lifnei iver lo titen michshol v'yareta melohecha ani Adonai.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah temet v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Share kochech to you, Bonnie. Looking forward
Thank
to hearing
you.
a little bit more from Bonnie with the Haftarah in just a moment. Yashir koach kol kavod to all of our honorees today. And I love on the chat looking and seeing everyone congratulating each other. It's just like being in shul. It's a beautiful moment. We are in shul. You know what I mean. Just for what it's worth, that last line, I mentioned for you earlier, we had one of the most, maybe the most problematic passage for me in the whole Torah. A line that I can never read too many times. Velifnei iver lo titen michshol. Do not put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. And it's not meant to be taken just literally, because you can do that a lot of times with people who can see, but sometimes they can't see. You know, it's about perspective and not putting a stumbling block in front of someone. Oh, just an amazing line there in the Torah. A great and meaningful Torah reading. Thank you, everyone, for following along. And again, to those of you who had honors. The Haftarah for this morning comes from one of the minor prophets. His name is Amos, or Amos in Hebrew. Bonnie Robinson's going to be reading from Amos chapter 9, verses 7 through 15. A very short Haftarah, one of the shortest of the year, in fact. It's in the Etz Chaim on page 706. So while Bonnie and you are all getting ready for that, we invite you to rise and invite Bill Weissman to come to the reading table to lead us in Hagba and Glila, the lifting and tying of the Sefer Torah. Again, please rise.
And Rabbi, we should say Yashar Koach on your Torah reading.
Oh, thank you.
Besides the fact that you gave a drush for each one of them. It was outstanding.
It was. Yashar
Thanks,
Koach,
Bill.
Rabbi Matthew.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you. It's an honor. V'zot Torah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, udvar Adonai miYerushalayim. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, udvar Adonai miYerushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael. Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Please be seated. Again, the Haftarah is from Amos, chapter 9, verses 7 through 15. And we're thrilled to have Bonnie Robinson joining us on Zoom to chant this Haftarah for us now. Enjoy, and take it away, Bonnie.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah uv'Moshe avdo Yisrael amo, uvinviei haemet v'tzedek.
Amen.
Haloch ibnei chushim atem li, b'nei Yisrael neum Adonai, halo et Yisrael, ha'eleti me'eretz Mitzrayim, Uflishti mikavtor va'aram mikir. Hine Adonai Elohim b'mamlacha hachata'a v'hishmadati ota me'al pnei ha'adama efes ki lo hashmid et Beit Yaakov neum Adonai. Ki hine anochi mitzaveh v'hanioti v'chol hagoyim et Beit Yisrael ka'asher yinoa b'kevara v'lo yipol tzeror aretz v'cherev yamutu kol chata'ei ami ha'omrim lo tagish v'takdim ba'adenu hara'a bayom hahu akim et sukat David hanofelet v'gadarti et pirtzehen v'harisotav akim uvniti hakimei olam Lema'an Yerushu et she'erit Edom v'chol hagoyim asher nikra shemi alehem neum Adonai oseh zot. Hine yamim ba'im neum Adonai v'nigash choresh b'kotzer v'dorech anavim b'moshech hazara v'hitifu heharim asis v'chol ha'gevaot titmogagna v'shavti et shavutam Yisrael uvanu arim neshamot v'yashavu v'nateu chiramim v'shat'u et jinam v'asu ganot v'achalu et perihem untatim al admatam v'lo yinatashu od me'al admatam asher natati lahem amar Adonai Elohecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim tzadik bechol hadorot ha'el hane'eman ha'omer ve'oseh hamdaber umkayem shekol dvarav emet v'tzedek. Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'ne'emanim devarecha v'davar echad midvarecha achor lo yashuv rekam Ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman ata. Baruch ata Adonai.
Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo.
Ha'el ha'ne'eman bechol dvarav.
Amen.
Rachem al Tzion ki hi beit chayenu, v'laluvat nefesh toshia bimheira v'yameinu, Baruch ata Adonai,
Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo.
Mesamech Tzion bevaneha.
Amen.
Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu b'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha uv'malchut beit David Mashiachecha b'mheira yavo v'yagel libeinu al kiso lo yishev zar v'lo yinchalu od acherim et kvodo ki v'shem kodshecha nishbata lo shelo yichben ero leolam va'ed Baruch ata Adonai
Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo.
Magen David.
Amen.
Al HaTorah, v'al HaAvodah, v'al HaNevi'im, v'al Yom HaShabbat hazeh, shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu, likdusha v'linucha, lechavod ultifaret. Al HaKol, Adonai Eloheinu, anachnu modim lach, umvarchim otach, yitbarach shimcha, befi kol chai tamid leolam va'ed, Baruch ata Adonai,
Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo.
Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
Asher Koach, Bonnie. Beautifully
Thank
done.
you.
Yasher Koach.
Baruch Tia.
You're getting a lot of love through the chat. Alice
Thank you to
Wiseman
everybody.
says, such a nice thing to you, Bonnie. You should take a look at what she wrote.
Okay, I will. Thanks.
Our thanks to Bonnie Robinson, who really did a beautiful job. I also liked what Terry Kushner wrote. Wow, wow, wow.
Terry's always a lady of few words.
You did great, Bonnie. It was so perfect. And it's a short Haftarah, but there's a lot of really interesting trope stuff going on there, and you nailed it. You
Yeah.
did a great job. So thank you very much. Bonnie will be our for the next several weeks. I think we have 9 weeks in a row coming up, or 8 of 9 weeks with bar and bat mitzvahs starting next Shabbat morning. All of these kids were delayed by the pandemic, and they're all going to get a chance, God willing, to get up on the bima, read from the Torah. Some of them you've seen do a preview of their Haftarah before. Many of them have learned more of the full Haftarah since then, and will be doing it from the bima, their speeches as well, getting their Talesim, and getting to go up to the Torah for Aliyot, and as well to read from the Torah. It's going to be very special. The first one is next Shabbat. And so we encourage you, if you enjoy our services, which we know and we hope all of you do, that you'll come back and you'll continue to show these kids what a virtual congregation can do to support them, especially given that many of them have had to wait a year to get up on the bima. So it's going to be very exciting. And then by the end of June, we'll have an opportunity for more people from the congregation to come back and do the Haftarot. But it's going to be really exciting to have Bar and Bat Mitzvah kids going forward. So our thanks again to Bonnie Robinson for this morning and all of the honorees in the Torah service. A thanks to the people who I get to work with, Bill Wiseman, Leslie Emery, my favorite Marvin Polanski, and all of you.
And thank you, Rabbi.
It's a pleasure. So,
David Wilder, by the way.
I saw that. I hoped you weren't going to take the bait, but you did.
Well, I did.
David Wilder asked if there was a joke of the week. No.
Well,
I can't possibly hope to compete with Rabbi Masa's joke of the week.
I was going to say that, Rabbi, that he's the master at that. We'll leave
He
him
is
alone.
he's the master. He is. Yeah. The joke of the week. I know. That story of the two fellows, the Rabbi Akiva teaching about the two fellows walking in the desert. One has the water, one doesn't, and they're going to die if there is a joke, but it's about different guys culturally walking through the desert, and they're all thirsty, and the Italian guy says the French guy wants wine, and the German guy wants Jägermeister or something, and sorry. I'm so thirsty, I must have wine. I'm so thirsty, I must have Jäger. And the Jewish guy says, I'm so thirsty, I must have diabetes. So there you go. I came up with a...
You pulled out a joke on the fly.
I tried.
You tried, yeah.
I told it terribly. I butchered it, but in honor of my partner, Rabbi Maz, and his jokes, and David Wilder's request.
Rabbi, he's still the master.
He's no question. No question.
But I have to say, wait a minute. Nobody reads Torah and teaches about it at the same time like Rabbi Matthew
Isn't that
Leibel.
true?
There's
Thanks.
nobody I have ever encountered. It's a very rare
Sweet.
combination of talents that you have, and we're lucky to have you here with us.
Like I said,
fun.
each one of them was a drush. You can take them on by himself, and they.
And
sound
as a
as
result, the service is taking way too long. So let's get ready to wrap it. But I appreciate what you said. I've been a Torah reader for 17 years, and it was my way into the synagogue. And it was supposed to be a summer job.
How many summers ago? 17.
17. I was 19 years old, and it was supposed to be a summer job. And then it was like, yeah, okay, I could do this while I'm in university. And then, yeah, I could do this in Halifax at the synagogues there. And, yeah, I could do it and be a radio host. Okay, now I'll become a rabbi. It's just all from the Torah, so it's been really great. Okay, we're gonna take the Torah back, but before we do that, we have a very, very important moment in our service before we conclude, which is the Misha Berach for all those who are sick. We're gonna do that in just a moment. If you have names, we have a long list of names, and I'll read these names. But if there are names that we don't have and you want to say them in the chat, so we say them out loud, please do that. Of course, you can also mention these names wherever you are right now, wherever you are sitting. You don't even have to mention them out loud. These are the people we are praying for. A refuah shlema, a full and complete recovery to a state of better health, whether it's physical health or mental health, whether it's someone who needs an emotional, a spiritual boost, or is actually dealing with something, a physical sickness, or if it's doctors, nurses, healthcare providers, people on the front lines as we are still fighting this pandemic and in many places a very scary third wave. We're praying for everyone in this Misha Berach. It's back in the Siddur, on page 34. Leslie is going to lead us, but first let's read the names of people we are specifically praying for this week. Aviva bat Malka, Yaakov ben Sion ben Miriam, Isabella bat Sarah, Chaya Zahava bat Leah, Batsheva bat Sarah, Yitzchak Dov ben Bela, Moshe Aharon ben Leah, Miriam Rachel bat Leah, Liba bat Fagel, Sharon bat Goldie, David Zvi ben Sarah Pessel, Dina Rachel bat Sarah Esther, Yitzchak Chaim ben Sarah, Tova Yael bat Dina Rachel, Shira Naomi bat Dina Rachel, Eliezer Meir ben Tova Yael, Katriel Yosef ben Tova Yael, Yisrael Chaim ben Shira Naomi, Leticia Corrado, Stephen Mibatia ben Wengari, Esther Leah bat Menicha, Bailey bat Razel, Tzivia bat Brana, Leah bat Rachel, Dvorah Gitel bat Leah, Binyamin Pinchas ben Dvorah Gitel, Nachum Le ben Leah, Avram ben Rachel, Achazan Shefer ben Miriam, Shandel bat Miriam, Harav Avraham Yehoshua Heschel ben Ruth, Risa bat Sarah, Elokim Pesach ben Esther Pessi, Sorasima Bracha bat Gidel Shandel, Uri Akiva ben Sarah, Rachel bat Sonia, Alfie Glass, Beryl ben Dvorah, Esther Bela bat Sarah, Atara bat Etel, Shmuel ben Gitel, Dana Brinley, Janice Diner bat Batsheva, Stephen Alexander Lee, Lucy Braverman, Michael Braverman, Risa Langhans, Karen Greenberg, Ari Ben Dvorah, Maria Carmelita Ferreira da Silva, Georgina Tassara, Shoshana Batsara, Adrian McDonald, Frida Bat Regina, Rishon Ben Sarah, Tzivia Bat Sluva, Moshe Ben Bluma, Bina Golda Batsara Ve'avra Batsara, Chana Bat Chaya Etel, Herbert Singer, Carla Bat Nancy, Kim Bat Nancy, Andres Ben Gloria, Temi Bat Rochel, Isabella Bat Sarah, Sam's List, Dave Scammell, Did I get everyone? Katie Miller, Holly Miller, Cindy Levinson, Dan Tagatak. I hope I said that right. Okay, and you can keep adding names, of course, as Leslie is going to chant for us or sing for us the Misha Berach. Again, it's page 34.
Misha Sheberach Avoteinu Mekor HaBracha Ne'imoteinu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misheberach Imoteinu Mekor HaBracha Ne'avoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Thank you, Leslie. Beautiful. We're nearing the end of our service. We've got to put the Torah back in the ark. I can see Bill's ready for that. I love, you got the gloves. It just adds dignity. It adds a little holiness to keep with the theme. Page 41 in the Siddur. Yahalelu. We invite you to rise.
Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado. Hodo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren le'amo. Tehila, tehila lechol chasidav, livnei Yisrael am keravo. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Page 43, Etz Chaim He. Last time we did this, I had the wrong key. Etz Chaim Ki. So I hope that I can put it in the right key here.
I'll sing wherever you play. It'll sound better if it's right, though. There we go. Etz Chaim He. Tom Chaya Meushar Derachea Darcheinom Bechol Netivoteia Shalom Hashiveinu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem.
Please be seated for just a moment for us to give you a few announcements, because we'll be standing again in just a second for Aleinu, the Mourner's Kaddish, and Adon Olam. Leslie, you got to pick your Adon Olam tune. I'm putting it on you for this week. So think about it. You have a few moments. Just be careful. I know it. We could try and do it if you. Coming up at Congregation Shered Zedek this week, as we mentioned, Rabbi Mas is on holiday, but he will be back in time for his Torah L'chaim study group on Thursday. An opportunity to learn with Rabbi Mas every Thursday at noon, a 1-hour class, usually on the Parsha, sometimes on holidays as the calendar as the calendar shows us, as kind of keep up current with the calendar. But this Thursday coming up will be, he'll be back and he'll be doing that. You can join for free through our website, YouTube, or Facebook page. We've got a special kind of, there's almost like a rabbi series that we're about halfway through. Of the five rabbis in town, myself, Rabbi Mas, Rabbi Cleo Rose of Congregation Acharei, Rabbi Alan Finkel of Temple Shalom, and Rabbi Yossi Ben-Arosh from Adas Yeshur in Herzliya, we each took a week as part of this 5-part series called Machloket Matters, How to Disagree Constructively. It's sessions here during the counting of the Omer. They're on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. You have to register and pay. I'm not sure if there's a few spots still open. I think there may be. If you want to call our partner in this event, Congregation Acharei. But Rabbi Cleo's session is this coming Wednesday, the 28th. Rabbi Mas the following week on May 5th. And mine is the week after, May 12th. And the materials are very, very interesting, very cool. It's a different kind of style of a class. And if you're interested in that, inquire with Congregation Acharei. Machloket Matters, How to Disagree Constructively. And we just want to remind you, of course, Shared Zedek's Catering Spring Takeout menu is out. Lots of classic SZ favorites. Chicken soup, flavorful oven roasted chicken or potatoes, decadent pastries, much, much more. You can see for more information on our website or Facebook page, and you can call the office and talk to Chef Joel and make an order for your upcoming Shabbat dinner. Minyan this evening is at 6 with Leslie. Shabbat Mincha with a Torah reading. Minyan tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. with Bill Wiseman and 6 p.m. with Bill Wiseman. And then during the week, 7:30 a.m. for Shacharit, Monday through Friday. Monday through Thursday, Mincha Mariv, 6 p.m. and Kabbalat Shabbat, Fridays at 5:30. As I mentioned, next Shabbat morning, we have our first of several bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs in a row. So it'll be fun. We'll have a few people in the building, which will be interesting. And we'll have some great kids on the bima. So have you thought about your Adon Olam?
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll get there in a second. We invite everyone to rise. Page 44, it's Aleinu, and it goes like this.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu k'goyei aratzot, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגבי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו. ידעת היום וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
We invite you to remain standing for Mourner's Kaddish. We extend condolences to families who are still in the first month of losing their loved ones. the families of Mindel Olenek, Mark Jeffries, Saul Rifkin, Toby Gutwillick, Bev Fingerhut, Martin Brody, and Jacob Seuferman. This week, we commemorate the yahrzeits of Ivan Edward Gillespie, father of Alice Weissman, Harry Rubenstein, father of Beverly Zatzer, Wilfred Raber, father of Lauren Raber, Pauline Barish, aunt of Eleanor Burke and great-aunt of Louise Raber and Elaine Gamer, Luba Gall, mother of Ben Gall, Miriam Barenhout, remembered by Abe and Tony Barenhout, Marcy Dempsey, daughter of Maxine Crystal, Yefroim Label, remembered by Maxine Crystal, and from One More Candle, Otto Bleiweiss, Zichronam Livracha, all of blessed memory. Again, Mourner's Kaddish is on page 46. Yit Gadal ve'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'gala uvizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam ulamei amaya. Yitbarach v'ishtabach v'itpa'ar v'tromam v'itnaseh v'ithadar v'itale v'ithalal Shemei dekudsha berichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. Adon Olam, page 47. Which one are we doing?
I think it's called the slow fast. Do you know what I mean? Adon olam asher malach.
Yes, of course.
We call it the high.
The slow
Oh,
fast.
slow, and then it goes fast.
Is
and
that
then it
high?
goes slow.
High does that, doesn't it?
Yes. If you'd like to know, it's written by. Okay, so this we're going to do Adon Olam, page 47. This is a good version. What was your? Can you? Is that the key you want to do it in?
That's the one that came to me.
Start singing it one more time.
Adon olam.
One more time.
Adon olam.
Right there, maybe.
Yep, that'll
Okay.
work.
So it was written by Uzi Hitman, which is a great name for a late. He's Olav Shalom. He's a songwriter from Israel. Wrote a lot of great songs. He wrote Toda al kol ma shebarata. Remember that one? And maybe you know Kan beiti po ani noladati.
You wrote Khan?
He wrote Khan.
Whoa.
See? Uzi Hitman. And
Just blew my mind.
And he's a hitman, right? Either that or a contract killer. But he actually was more of a songwriter. And he wrote this version of Adon Olam that Leslie calls the slow fast. So...
Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra lehet nasa v'chevto kol azai melech shemo nikra Acharei kichlot hakol levado imloch nora behu haya behu hover behu yeh betifara Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra lehet nasa v'chefso kol azai melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora ve'hu haya ve'hu hover ve'hu yeh betifara Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra lehet nasa v'chefso kol azai melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora ve'hu haya ve'hu hover betifara Behu haya behu hover betifara Behu echad ve'ein sheni lehamshilo lehachbira ve'li reshit בלי תכלית, ולא העוז, ולא העוז, והמשרה. והוא אלי, וחי גואלי, וצור חבלי, ועת צרה, והוא ניסי, ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי, ביום אקרא. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא. ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא. ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה. והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה. בידו הפקיד רוחי בתישן, והעירה עם רוחי יביאתי. אדוני לי, ולא יירא. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא. ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא.
אחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה והוא הווה
בתפארה. והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom,
Well
Yashikov.
done. Good, Adon Olam.
Wasn't it good?
Thank you.
Hey, did Mr. Hitman put any breath marks in that music?
It got a little trickier than I thought.
It was fabulous. Thank you, everyone, for a wonderful morning. Great Shabbat to all of you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom,
Mevorach.
everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
And we'll see you next time.